All right, recording in progress. All right, my friends, we're here together, members of the Divine Nine. Proud to say that we're going to spill out some knowledge to the community regarding House Bill 198 in the state of Delaware. And I have some good friends and family here to talk about the topic. And I have Mr. Cliff Von Howell of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated.
Good evening.
And as well, I have Ms. Dara Law Savage here of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us.
And myself, Terrence Moore of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. And I thank you both for being here. And we're just going to talk a little bit, just have a little hometown discussion about House Bill 198. And I just want to preface by saying, I'm one of those individuals, I don't know it all. And I'll be the first to tell you that I don't know it all. And I've been in this state since 1995. And I just found out that the state of Delaware did not ratify the 13th Amendment until the 1900s. I just found out that information. I lied to you not. So what, 36 years to ratify and agree to say that slavery should be abolished. That was news to me. I was blown away. And that happened in the state.
Who would brag on that? Who would brag on that? And who would teach that?
I mean, wow. So, and I found out through Brian Stevenson's website, and I was just blown away. So it just goes to show you, you're always learning. And so it just goes to show you the importance of knowing history so that we don't repeat the terrible moments. So having said that, just want to introduce a couple of questions to the panel for you to openly share and talk about. First thing I'd like to have you just discuss for a few minutes. Why do you think, or could you explain why you think House Bill 198 is so very necessary?
Mr. Howell, go ahead.
Well, generally, we do ladies first here.
Okay. Well, I think it's important because of the comments that you just said. Even some of our legislators, not just everyday folks, but people who are in office and hold positions of power are under the misinformed guise that Black history is already being taught. They have said, I learned all about Black history when I was in school. I don't know what school you went to. But it's important because, and I said this the other day when I was having a chat with Mr. Howell, if you were in a room majority full of white children, and all they learned about were the kings and queens of Egypt, about different African countries, about wars that took place in Africa, about Carter G. Woodson, about Ida B. Wells, about Harriet Tubman, about Frederick Douglass. How would they feel in school? They would feel disconnected, left out, as though they did not matter. And our Black and brown children have felt that since the integration of schools. That's why it's important to feel included. Everyone talks about being inclusive of folks with different lifestyles, but what about being inclusive of people with different skin tones and different backgrounds? That's why it's important.
I think everything that Miss Savage said is absolutely correct. Um, I want to expand on it just a bit. I want to first of all say that Black history is important, and it's important that it be taught in American schools because Black history is American history, first and foremost. Second, to the point that Dara said about since the integration of schools, I'm going to take a different route and I'm going to offer a alternate perspective. Until Black history is taught in American schools, the American schools are not integrated. Brown versus Board of Education desegregated schools. It did not integrate them because to me, an integrated school is a school where the curriculum, the teachers, and the environment is one in which all children can thrive. And we know that the curriculum was never developed with African American students in mind. Many of the teachers in those schools where African American children were subjected to trauma never intended to teach African American students. And we know that the environment was not an environment that was conducive to learning. So I think, if nothing else, 2021 is time that we integrate schools throughout America.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, where can constituents or citizens access information about House Bill 198 for their further knowledge and understanding?
Oh, they can pull up a copy of it from the General Assembly website. They just have to put it in, HB 198, and they can pull up all the versions of it. They can pull up the vote to see who was supportive of it and who was not. It is public information.
And to that point, Mr. Moore, I think everyone should go and look it up. They can definitely go to legis.delaware.gov and search for House Bill 198. But it's important that everybody read the legislation for themselves because we know that our community is subject to misinformation, some by design, some by default. And if you read it for yourself, another person can't tell you what's there.
That's true. Very true. And now, when it comes to the implementation of House Bill 198, and the fact that we have school board member, Mrs. Savage, to assist with this, answering this question, what expectations should citizens have in their school district regarding the implementation of House Bill 198?
Well, and again, this is why it's important to read the legislation. It doesn't go into effect this school year. It's next school year to allow for a planning year. That's one way to hold your district accountable. Are you planning to intentionally infuse the curriculum with the Black experience in every content area? So that's one. You can ask, there's public comment at every school board meeting. All you have to do is register to participate. Now, each district has their qualifications. For instance, some districts will not let you comment on something that's not on the agenda. But you do have that option. You also have your superintendent's email address and phone number. I'd just like to know how the district is planning to implement House Bill 198. It's a very simple question. Email them. and email your board members, because here's what people do not understand a lot of times about school boards is being on a school board is very romanticized. We don't go in and make sweeping changes. Our job is to write, create, enforce, and uphold policy. So the question then becomes, is there a policy in draft or in the works to ensure that House Bill 198 is implemented properly? That's how constituents and stakeholders can hold their district accountable. Going to the individual, you can always email an individual teacher as well, but remember, this is every content area. So you'll be doing a lot of emails if you go the teacher route, but you have the school board, you have the superintendent that you can ask those questions and keep asking until you get the answer that you need.
Now that leads me to wonder if I may piggyback on that. So it appears that the state is not going to be responsible for developing the curriculum, but each school district. Am I understanding that correctly?
Mr. Howell, go ahead. That's in the legislation.
So there's this interesting dynamic here in Delaware. The Delaware Department of Education pretty much allows school districts to operate with autonomy. The legislation requires a structure and a foundation for what must be taught, but the bill itself is to be carried out at the school district level. Now, one thing that you said, what expectations should the community have? I want to say the community, more than expectation, the community should become active, right? I want to be activation, right? Be proactive. The fact that the state itself, right? If districts utilize the State Department of Education as a resource, and the State Department of Education does not currently have a resource that they can push down to the districts in this area, it is something that I think constituents should be writing their legislators about. And it's something that constituents should be using as an opportunity to make sure that this becomes corrected. I'm not 100% sure, and I don't know every bill that's ever been passed in the history of this state, but I don't know how many bills have been passed and there has not been some type of resource or some type of support for the individuals that the bill who are going to have to carry out the bill. And I'm not saying that DOE isn't working on anything, because they absolutely do have a working group of social studies teachers. But as we know, the legislation is larger than social studies. It's all areas of curriculum. So it's better to have something than nothing, but it is no substitute for having a solid plan. And the fact that there's not an existing resource that could be pushed down immediately to help these school districts creates a fear within me, right? Because I don't trust the districts left to their own devices, going to be honest with you.
That was my concern.
Because folks who are not interested in this work, if left to their own devices, will not be interested in doing this work. Right. And I'll stop there, but that is my concern. Activation, right, as well as expectation.
Yeah, and I begin to wonder at the state level, as far as resources being provided to school districts that are now going to be expected to present a healthy curriculum to students. My thinking is, what models are available from which school districts can begin to develop some kind of curriculum for our children. Because as you said earlier, Clifton, and I'm sure Ms. Savage as well can agree, that not everybody is as passionate about this as others.
Mhm.
And the end result might be a watered down version of Black history that, or some things, some components missing.
Right.
If it's not unified, I'm seeing some problems there. I'm happy that this exists, and I'm not trying to bring up anything controversial. But as you said, Clevon, I'm seeing the importance of accountability.
Right.
I really am seeing that, because
Now,
I did not know that.
Yeah, what we try to do, because the state of Delaware doesn't have a curriculum. You're right for it. What we try to do in the legislation, and I don't think we've mentioned this yet. Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker is the driving force behind this. So I do want to be sure to give her props. She is the one who sponsored this bill, and she is the one who pulled together a team that Mr. Howell and I were blessed enough to be a part of, to do this work. And one of the things we did talk about in our meetings, because we had DOE folks in our meetings too, was that you can't say, here's this curriculum. They don't do that in any content area. They have guidelines and they have suggestions, but they're not going to give you a packaged curriculum. But in the legislation, what we did do was provide some resources. I think there were 8 at the bottom of that legislation of places that people could tap into to begin to pull that information together. So, outside of that in the legislation, no, there isn't anything set as far as what is to be taught. Because if you think about it, in Wilmington, they're going to do a focus on Judy Johnson more so than they would maybe in Sussex. In Sussex, they may hit a Rosedale Beach in their curricula, where they may not hit that in Newcastle County or Kent County. So it is going to vary, because just like Delaware history is different, it's going to differ in some aspects. Some aspects are global, and they've been missing all along. But I think that the fear of that was, if we say, here's this, then it's why is there a curriculum for this? Why isn't there a here's this for economics? Why isn't there a here's this for health? So I don't think they really wanted to open that can of worms, because that's what it would be if there was a set curriculum for this and for nothing else.
So they kind of wanted to leave it open-ended so that the I guess the local areas could be infused into that makes sense.
And that's just how Delaware works education-wise anyway. They don't, every district does their thing as long as they uphold the standards.
Okay, cool. Leads me to the next question. And, I don't know if the listeners are aware, but Tennessee passed a bill that became at the forefront of a lot of controversy, where they said they would withhold funding from schools. Imagine that. Withhold funding from schools that teach anything connected to systematic racism. So,
because Tennessee of all places has been void historically of systemic racism. Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. So, having said that, with so much concern and fear hovering over critical race theory and its impact on society, how do we peacefully and respectfully address the opposition at various levels as the school districts implement the curriculum? Because it's sure to pop up. And I'm sure at the board meetings, you're going to hear there are folks coming forth expressing their fears. So how do we face that? I mean, with the concern, because
Right.
you know it's out there and it's coming. How do we address the opposition?
Well, I'm going to be quick because Mr. Howe has a great response to this. I was asked to give a statement at our last school board meeting. It was public. It's on Facebook or on Zoom. You can see it, about House Bill 198. And I made sure in that statement that I said, House Bill 198 has absolutely nothing to do with critical race theory. I made it clear and I wanted it on the record. Does that mean questions are not still going to come? Absolutely not. But we will always have that on the record to go back to. They're not at all, they're not connected at all. And I love the way Mr. Howell addresses people who say they are against critical race theory. So I'm gonna let him share his conversation that he has.
So I think, Mr. Moore, first and foremost, when people approach me with the question about critical race theory, my first response to them is, well, tell me what you know about critical race theory first. Because most of what they are giving you is something that they're regurgitating from some other source, right? They haven't spent the time, haven't put the research in, because if they did, they would understand that the question they're asking you germane to the topic at hand, they don't go together. That's the first thing. Second thing is this, right? Depending on how smug I want to be. If I'm feeling particularly smug, then I would just respond to them that you should be concerned about critical race theory in our K-12 school system when we begin teaching doctoral level courses in our K-12 school system, because that is the realm in which critical race theory is studied. It is not studied even as at the undergraduate level, not even at the graduate level until you get into doctoral theses and level theory. So it's of zero concern as it relates to the K-12 school system. This is just a weaponization and a propaganda campaign to push back. Dr. Tawanda Bond from Wilmington, she has the most amazing, she shuts it down, right? If you mention critical race theory around her, she's gonna roll her eyes, she's gonna shut it down. She says critical race theory is a equity detour, period, point blank.
Agreed.
I'm glad you brought that up, because honestly, I did not know that. Meaning where critical race theory is brought up. So, you know, a kindergartner has you don't have to worry about your kindergartner being taught critical race theory. You don't have to worry about your 12th grader dealing with critical race theory. You may not get your college freshman talking about critical race theory, friends out there. So there's fear necessary to even bring up the topic. And I'm so glad that you shared that. And I'm dealing with, I'm trying to deal with this carefully, because I know that nothing is perfect. And, you know, you have a lot of gears, moving gears and parts in the discussion of how to implement the curriculum, and a lot of people trying to figure this out. And I know that some teachers, as they teach their topics, say and do things unintentionally. At least I hope so. But anyway, without mentioning any names, and we had an incident that took place, and the teacher was teaching, and it was recorded on Zoom. And I will say the teacher unintentionally addressed an aspect of slavery that was kind of unsavory by some parents. I am not sure if it took place in our state. I'm seeing heads. I'm seeing heads nod. And, you know, giving the teacher the benefit of the doubt. I think it was done unintentionally. But how do we make sure that teachers don't make light of the curriculum and that it is taught with the level of sensitivity and dignity that it deserves?
Can I just jump in here real quick?
Yep.
Sure.
I want to first say that the thoughts and opinions expressed here are those solely of Cliff on How in representation of Cliff on How Consulting. They do not represent the views or opinions of the Caesar Rodney School District. All right, I gotta say that if I'm going,
Yes, you do.
if I'm going to comment as myself. All right, let me start this with first a question. If you are an educator and you are in a school setting, you are there to educate, correct?
Correct.
So in that capacity, you are doing your job. It is intentional. Your purpose for being there is to educate. That's intentional. I don't know how an educator unintentionally educates. Now, the consequences, you might have unintended consequences to your instruction, but it is hard, it's difficult for me, a person, a individual, to think that a teacher in a classroom setting was not purposeful in teaching. That is just difficult for me. So with that there, I say the way that we make certain that individuals aren't making light of Black history and that the individuals who are executing curricula are qualified is to make sure that your staff has the cultural competency to be able to deliver the instruction, right? If they don't have the ability, right? If they didn't have the ability, if a educator didn't have the ability to teach math, you wouldn't have them teaching math, correct? And if they can't teach math and that's what they're there to do, then you remove that educator, correct? It has to have the exact same emphasis and focus. The fact that individuals are not knowledgeable of the history of Black and Africanoid people in America is not an excuse for them not being able to teach the content, take a course, right?
Professional development.
Yes. Do the things necessary to increase the knowledge base of your staff, because our children deserve it, and the children in totality, all children will benefit from a more comprehensive education that's inclusive of more people.
Awesome. True. Very true. And, you know, I think as well that while we are in the preparation stage of implementing the curriculum, and I believe, Dara, you said it's a year away.
Yes.
I think it's important that teachers begin to take this time to educate themselves.
So let me hop on there real quick. One of my roles is the educational coach at the early college high school at Delaware State University. And one thing that I am doing to facilitate that, as teachers are doing summer work, because for everybody watching, teachers do not only work through June, we work all summer. But in their planning, one of my tasks is to provide those talking points, those points of reference for them to research when social studies is meeting to plan their project or their scope and sequence for the year. My challenge is to provide them, these are some names and some topics that you can consider infusing into your planning. If you don't know what they are, here are some resources for you to find out. When math is planning, when ELA is planning, when health, my God, Simone Biles' story alone could be used in health class. So there are folks in place in different districts to help provide those resources. The question is, are they? And if they aren't, how are they being held accountable?
Well, any final thoughts?
Again, well, not again, but there's a part of this legislation that a lot of people are not aware of. There were students that were critical to this process. One young lady, Taraya Hyland, just graduated from St. George's, was critical in formulating this legislation, working with Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker. Mr. Howell, help me. Tyler.
I don't remember his last name.
He's actually a college freshman, but he helped to start the Delaware Black Student Coalition with Taraya Hyland. And they were instrumental in getting this legislation written. They were in on the revision process. They knew very clearly what they wanted to see in this legislation. And I don't think that they were mentioned in the beginning of our conversation. So I wanted to be sure to mention that we were on the team, but they were the heavy hitters. They knew exactly what they wanted. And we had to kind of say, okay, we understand this is what you want, but we have to make sure we frame it this way for all audiences. So it was a learning experience, not only for us, but for them, to learn how to go about changing things through a system that's already in place. So I just wanted to make sure that they were recognized in our conversation. And please don't be afraid to ask for resources and ask for assistance in holding folks accountable to make sure House Bill 198 is implemented in your district.
And if I may connect to that point, and first of all, my apologies for not bringing that up, because that was one of my questions. And you know how when you're trying to navigate using two tools, devices, sometimes you miss things. Will these individuals, whether they are students or members of the community, and as well yourselves, will you be mentioned as co-sponsors with the bill, or is it just connected with the legislators?
I'll let Mr. Howell take it.
No, so the legislators are the co-sponsors. I think in terms of recognition for participation, it's one of those things that, if you were a part of it, I will speak for myself that I didn't take part in this process for recognition. Some people do know, that Dara and myself were part of the team, but it is about the team, and it is bigger than I. The fact that for generations and generations to come, that Delaware students will learn Black history is all the sponsorship that I need and all the acknowledgement that I need.
Oh, and also on the Senate side, Representative Tizzy Lockman was the go-to person on the Senate side as well. It was really a learning experience for me. I'm a project-based learning teacher, and this was project-based learning at its core. Because we knew what the end was at the very beginning. And through learning about the legislative process, I participated in phone calls and public participation and all this. I had never done any of that before. I knew what it was, but I really didn't understand the process. We've all watched that little, I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, but there was so much more to it that I learned through this process, and I'm grateful to Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker for the opportunity to actually experience the process firsthand.
It appears we have a lot of unsung heroes. Whenever we're moving the society forward, It wasn't just Dr. King. You
Right,
know, he
right.
linked arms with a lot of very important people. Any final thoughts, Clifton?
I think Mrs. Savage, she covered and hit all the points that that I would have hit. Just what an amazing opportunity, and what an amazing opportunity that's before students in Delaware, all students. A more comprehensive education around the significant contributions of all people benefits all students. A more informed and better educated student population produces a more informed and better educated society. So here's
Nicely
to
put.
a better educated society.
Awesome. And one thing, if I can, in our conversation, I will say this, that when it comes to Black history, as Clifton said earlier, and also Dara, our history is part of the entire global history. And it's important, it's very important, and it should not be taken lightly. I do recall my father in particular purposefully making sure that I was learning Black history at home. And it's important for parents to take the bull by the horns and begin. You don't have to overwhelm your children, but just begin at as early as possible to show them that it's important to you that they learn about our history. And so when they come to school, it's just a natural flow. So I think it's very important that parents know that Black history starts with you, teaching that to your children. And I appreciate you both for taking this time to talk about House Bill 198, a historical document indeed.
And Mr. Moore, I would be remiss, since this is a Divine Nine conversation, if we did not acknowledge the fact that the House bill was named House Bill 198 in homage to 1908. Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker is a member of the illustrious Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Right.
And she chose those numbers specifically in homage of the first African-American sorority for college women.
Awesome. Awesome. I did not know that. I'm learning every day. So I appreciate you both for taking your time to talk about this, this important bill and educating the community about what's coming up. So everybody stay woke, stay involved in your school district.
Say that part again.
Say, excuse me.
Say that one again. Stay involved.
Stay involved, stay woke, stay involved in your school district, and let's hold each other accountable for teaching our children, no matter what shade they are, teaching our children about the importance of Black history. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Quite
Thank
welcome.
you. Good night.
Good night.